and seeking to understand what's currently going on. So, budget for next year, conversations going on. National Treasury says tomorrow, kujani KICC tuzungumze watu wa mataifa yote come to KICC tomorrow. And then currently, the National Assembly is planning on Committee on Planning and Finance and Planning is in 6 counties. Today and tomorrow, they are expected to be hearing to hold 4 sessions in Mombasa, Siaya, Taita Taveta, and Kericho counties today and tomorrow. All right? So only 6 counties, and now that's already a big issue. Why 6? Why 6 counties?
That's sampling.
Yeah?
But they need to explain to us how
but give it to them. I think let's appreciate when there is. So the National Assembly started a process 2 years ago of going around. So they've been actually every year they pick different counties.
Okay.
They've been going around the different, especially the Budget Appropriations Committee, for many reasons. Though now they cannot justify after the impeachment, they proved that within a weekend they actually can sit. They can have sittings
on one single day.
On one single day in every
counties.
county. Yes. So we can no longer excuse them. But for this one, they actually have been going through.
So they've been doing it rotationally.
Yes. So they've been going to different counties, which is a good start. But also they need to be encouraged that in a day like today of technology, you actually can have a national conversation.
That's the point.
Yes. I mean, we all do it.
That's the point.
Abraham, you are being really a nice, kind, probably Christian Kenyan, and you are looking for a reason to justify and say, okay, let's accept that this is what they can do. Actually, no, not really.
Yeah.
I cannot agree with you there. I am not going to give them credit for something that is done in the manner that they're doing it. They know full well that what they're doing is to give us the impression that something is actually being done, and yet when you look at the results, you ask, okay, what exactly have they done? They've been going around the country. They went around the country and came up with a finance bill that people reacted to. So what did they do? What did they learn? What did they hear? Or are we saying that what they heard and what they took in is what led them to come up with that finance bill? That's one. 2, when you look at the way this particular parliament has behaved, there is absolutely nothing that this parliament comes up with that must not... everything they come up with must be looked at through a microscope. You must look at every detail. Yes. Because there's usually mischief afoot somewhere. It's just that you can't visibly see it. It may appear to be microscopic. I'm saying this because if you look at some of the things that they have accepted, like government spending, you ask, wait, folks, we are already in a deep enough hole, and you're saying that it is okay for us to borrow more to spend more. Surely, is there not a problem here somewhere?
There's a problem. And at the point I was saying, I applaud them for going out to listen.
I don't. I don't.
Yeah, which I encourage, and I think it needs to happen.
That's why I said, Abraham, you're a nice person.
What they are doing with that is where we are beating them, and we must continue to beat them, because even when I mean it's painful, because when they don't act on the proposals of Kenyans, which really has been our cry, then we have a big problem. So on that I agree with you.
Yeah.
On that front I completely agree with you.
So I mean, then for you, Cuba, so because this is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of time that's currently being spent asking questions about what Kenyans think about how essentially you're going to use their money in the next 1 year. But that will you actually take the considerations of Kenyans into the decisions that you make? And isn't that where then it really matters? That you have to say, okay, fine. Kenyans have told you we want to see that if you said we're going to collect tax to be able to do this. Because essentially that's what you're doing. You're coming back to mom and saying, can I have the sweet? So if we give you the sweet, right, how are you going to ensure that what Kenyans have said you do with this little morsel of goodness that we've given you, that you will actually make it count for something? So does that, and we come back to then, isn't that what really matters? And how can we be sure that what Kenyans are saying right now will actually be put into practice? Because that's why June 25th happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it is possible to side with CT here, which is that even though those public participation opportunities sometimes are made available, there's of course a question of the quality, right? So if you look at the amount of time that's been allowed for the sector hearings that will be happening Wednesday, Thursday and Friday this week, I think it's an hour. Is it
An hour 15 minutes.
An hour 15 minutes per
Per
sector.
sector.
Per sector. And
You see?
those
Yeah.
are 10 sectors. Within those sectors, there are probably hundreds of programs and sub-programs, right? That someone may be, interested in or may think is important. So it is an important question that we do need to face, which is how do you move a nation forward in a way that's reflective of the interest of everybody? And even though it's not reflective of the interest of anybody or of everybody, how do you do it in a way that at least you capture the aspirations and views of at least the majority,
Right.
or the Gen Zs since I'm representing? So how is it that you make sure that their views are actually captured and that it's also a thing of how you feel, right? So when you go to a public participation or you see that notice, do you feel like your input is valued, right? So if you go to a public participation, I don't know, in Isiolo, and it's on a Friday, and it's hot, right? You've all been put in a social hall, and you're being told, here's a 300-page document. We need your inputs, right? Or even worse, you're being told, in your ward, we are giving you 5 projects worth 5 billion, right? Just decide what you want. And then, you're given 30 minutes, and you're supposed to now present your views. And then you're told after that, we need to go and, depending on the culture, you need to go and pray, or, we need to go have lunch, or whatever it is, right? So then, how do you feel after coming out of that? Like, do you feel like your government is actually listening to you, right? So like Dr. Rugo was mentioning, there is the way you interact with government at that point of accessing the service. But there's also the way that you interact with government in terms of having your voice heard, right? And it can't just happen every 5 years when we vote. It has to be a continuous process.
Just be continuous.
Yeah.
How would you do it if you were to do it, Cuba?
Well, I believe that communication starts from the listener, right? When you're communicating with someone, you don't consider what you want to say first. You consider what the other person would like to hear, how they would like to hear it. So, for example, in the perspective of the Gen Zs, I mean, perhaps if we had younger civil servants, that would help. But more of, how do you find these different parts of the population where they are, right? So the suggestion Dr. Rugo made around leveraging digital technology, right? Because talking about roughly 16% of the population, that's relatively digital natives, right? So people who are actually generally are found online. So are there initiatives that we can make or take to actually leverage that? There's also some guidance that would be useful in terms of the standards for public participation that are set for civil servants and for public institutions. And of course, there's some reforms already going on with the public participation bill. We have the revision of the public participation guidelines at the subnational level, at the county level, which is supposed to provide that guidance, right? Because at the end of the day, it's that accounting officer or that CEC that's sitting at the county level who decides how that forum goes, right?
Yeah.
So are there standards within the law? Are there guidelines for what are the best options? Because even within a specific county, like for example, Isiolo, you're dealing with many cultures, right? So there definitely needs to be an understanding of what is the best way to hear the Kenyan population, but also what are the guide rails that we can use, or what options can we actually have for that? Yeah.
And that's why now the ZKE campaign that we've been talking about and we've been involved in is dealing with this. So you're talking to a majority youthful population.
Yeah.
Many of them, like you've said, are digital native. So how do you reach out to them? Now, the ZKE campaign has been saying, all right, so let's see if we can actually have these conversations happening among the youth. Last week, we were talking about the proposed bill by the Attorney General on public participation. And what is it that people want to hear? And many of them were saying, all right, so this bill, is it addressing the needs of Kenyan people in wanting to engage with their government, in wanting to tell the government, this is what we want, this is how we'd like it done, right? Or is it just ticking a box? It's the same thing you're saying now with these finance laws. These finance law amendment bills and the budget making process, the hearings that start tomorrow at KICC, and giving them 1 hour. Is there any other way you could have done this to make sure that a majority of the people can actually participate and engage without necessarily having to come and queue at KICC and spend an entire afternoon waiting for their 1 hour slot so they can come and maybe present, maybe hand over a document, maybe, are there other ways in which you could engage? And this is, Ben Omolo is saying, maybe what we should actually think about is, because the president is coming to address Parliament on Thursday, with the expected State of the Nation address, he should first of all come and tell us what he has done in the budgets in 2023, 2024.
Correct.
Before telling us what he'd like to do with the next year's financial budget, right?
Yes.
Come and account to the people. This is what we have done with a 3+ trillion shilling budget for 2 years since I became president. 6 trillion shillings you've given me. This is the value for it. And then we move forward from there and say, and now we are currently in the process of making the next year's financial budget, and we expect this to happen. Of course, we know what he's going to come and tell us. The cabinet memo from last week has painted the picture. Things have improved. The country has stabilized. We are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, actually, I was going to say that one of the starting points, which I think will be very, very critical, is that any public participation, and we are pushing for this, has to start with what have you done from the previous budget. Yeah, and we are insisting that all reports, anytime we have a public participation forum, they need to start by saying last year, this is the amount we have been allocated. And even when, for instance, you are doing a budget, you're having conversations in November, you've already implemented for 4 months. You've been at it July, August, September, October. You have something to report. The first quarter report actually should be out, the implementation report. You should be able to say, for the first half of the year, these are the things we've been able to do. And as you do that, even when the president comes to give the State of the Nation address, we need to have actually the right of reply. We need to be able to say, but on the ground, this and this and this and this.
This is our State of the Nation.
This is our State of the Nation. This is our experience. So, of course, the president has a challenge between the two statements that were released on the same day, the cabinet memo and the bishop's memo. They are two different countries, that were painted there. Clearly. And have continued to be. Because
this is why he split between being head of government, cabinet, and head of state, those two.
Precisely. But this economy is being experienced by all of us. So it's critical that conversation
Being experienced differently.
I agree. It's being experienced differently, but by majority, it is being experienced not in the most favorable and desirable way. So that starting with and Cuba has rightly said, put the information in a way that is consumable, but that information should be information that is encouraging me to be an active participant in society, want to pay my taxes, but also, why are we asking questions to people who cannot answer? This is what I mean. Why are you saying people need to pay tax, yet they have no income? I mean, is that even a fair conversation?
But does that not tell you that the people who are saying it are completely out of touch with the citizenry and the country that they live in?
Yet, what we should be having a bigger conversation, and we had this discussion. Part of these laws all coming in, part of our position has been, why don't you face these discussions? Say, we are going to work to create employment for so many, then we will raise taxes by so much.
Yeah.
So it's so that then you're not taxing me. Actually you start now taxing me, not collecting tax from me.
No, you put it well.
Yeah. So
put it very well.
So that because if I don't have an income, then basically what you are doing is that now you have burdened the social tax, the black tax, as we call it, of people with a regular income has just gone up.
Yeah.
Because first, you are already collecting more from them. 2, we all run another 3-4 families. It's a fact. As long as you have a paycheck,
as long as
doesn't matter how much how much it costs. Our brothers and sisters across the world also do remittances, which almost are matching how much we borrow. Sometimes, because they are significant.
Yes.
And that money is coming because of the needs. And some of these needs are not needs you can wish away. They are not made up needs. They are real. So for me, you have to balance employment, and that has to be the focus. That has to be the conversation. How do we make the business environment more conducive? Because right now, the burden of compliance, the burden of payment has become so much that it's no longer lucrative to do business here. And you see it by number of companies that are opting to move. In the last 10 years, just how many companies have moved their operations from Kenya.
Yeah.
when they should have, and then now we are starting to to compete with people who we shouldn't quite be competing. I was very surprised when I heard, for instance, Bowen set up in Addis Ababa. Nairobi has much more to offer.
And yet here we are.
But isn't that the consciousness that we speak about? So
Yeah.
I can ask, that's the consciousness that we speak about. That then it would appear that then in another jurisdiction, that consciousness then exists.
Yeah.
Whereby they see and they can understand that certain policies then must be implemented in a certain way to have things done.
Correct.
You can't steal the thing. You can't steal the goose and expect that the egg on its own is going to
Yeah.
keep
But you
going.
bring in another subject
Yeah.
of accountability. You
This
see,
is it.
Yeah.
And for
You
me,
see,
you can
the-
have as many numbers.
this-
Yeah.
these people will not, you see, they will go their merry way because they are accustomed to this impunity, and they expect that so long as they give the indication that they're taking a few boxes, we'll be content.
Exactly.
The accountability factor has to be
Yeah.
constant.
It has to be constant.
So this is my problem.
Yeah.
That we can have the reams and reams of paper policy and all of that, which everybody knows what you should do. The financial experts, the economists, the accountants, everybody who's holed up in treasury or anywhere else knows what is supposed to happen. They practice this on a daily basis. We know the stuff. But for me, it's another level of consciousness then that must be applied if we're going to see any of these things come to fruition. How do we do that? I think that becomes, how do we do that? How do we not steal the thing? How do we not be irresponsible economically? How do we actually have development of an economy in your foresight? How?
Rule of law?
Yeah, I mean, and that is not something you can wait upon the goodness of my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hearts of many, as a good book will tell us, are desperately wicked.
Yes.
And scheming of evil. So it has to be enforced by the rule of law. There must be a cost. There are two things that must happen. There must be a cost for wrongdoing, and there must be a reward.
A reward for right.
Because
doing the
today
right
we
thing.
don't seem to be celebrating public officials who do well. But for me, I think it's a conversation that needs to continue happening.
Let's plug in your conference.
Yes. And that part of that is that as Budgeti Hub, one of the signature engagements that we are starting is a public finance conference. We've not had one in this country, which basically brings together, players from all quarters, treasury, counties, private sector, civil society actors. And we're going to be having one this end of this week on 21st and 22nd. Interestingly, it actually coincides with the sector hearings. That was not the initial plan, but there we are. And we are going basically to be participating in both processes. The idea is to come and say, guys, we've moved our country up to where we are, but we can do more. Let's come together and have a conversation that perhaps is a bit more neutral, where we can look at problems for what they are and think solutions, think a difference, because we owe it to ourselves to build this country, because no one else can build it for us.
Dr. Abraham Rugo Murio, Executive Director at Budgeti Hub, Kiba Houghton Jr., economist, Gen Z economist. As you leave the room, go with this email in your head, right?
Yeah.
prioritybanking.ke@sc.com. prioritybanking.ke@sc.com. That's Priority Banking for Standard Chartered. Email them, tell them, I got money. I want to make it, to convert their money into wealth. All right?
Already a member.
Asante sana. Keep it here for more conversations. It's 8 a.m.